Hello, 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 everybody. Yes, it's been months.
Oh my god, it's been months.
But we're back. It's Advent Nebula.
And Cruellica Kain. And today we're here to talk about Crunchyroll.
So, it's been roughly, I want to say by the time this episode's getting recorded, 2 weeks since Kyle McCurley came out talking about how he was not going to be voicing Mob in Mob Psycho's 100 Season 3. And he came out talking about how he had tried to get Crunchyroll to negotiate a contract with him and have a meeting with SAG because he was willing to do a non-union job to reprise the role. Crunchyroll just responded to him back through a few emails and said they had recasted the character and never sat down with a meeting. He started a whole hashtag on Twitter called #JustAMeeting. And fans have been very supportive of Kyle through this.
So, how I wanted to focus on this, because I'm going to let you focus on it from the fan perspective. I'm going to focus on this from the human resources, employment law perspective. So, technically, in all legality, Crunchyroll, because they hire freelancers for many of their voice actors, technically don't have to hire union workers. However, because so many voice actors and actresses are working on projects now for more than just anime companies, more and more voice actors are becoming unionized.
Yeah. And as Kyle was talking about, he's a member of Coda, which is for the union for dub actors that Netflix is heavily invested in with it. So he wanted Crunchyroll basically to follow the Netflix guidelines down there, and it seems like that's why Netflix would not get with SAG and get with Kyle and appropriate a contract for him on this.
And one of the challenges with a lot of voice acting, I'm just going to mention this from the employment aspect, is because they're freelance, they are one and done, so to speak. Now, if they're voice acting for a long-running series, then yes, they will make more money than some of their peers who just appear in one singular episode. But some of the commentary from one of the most recent articles off of Kotaku, and Kotaku, I have to give them credit for, they really research a lot of their stories. A number of the voice actors who have appeared in series would just get a flat rate of $150 before taxes.
Look at Jujutsu Kaisen, the actors got paid $300 for a movie that made almost $35 million.
And that's the challenge, is many of those dub actors, because it's one movie. Now, this is not to say that the main cast don't get continuous money, because this is their revenue stream. Most voice actors and actresses hope and pray they're going to get a main character that's going to be in a number of episodes. Not saying that the main cast for One Piece are set for life, but at least they have a steady paycheck. But if you only get bit roles here and there, you get one small amount, and some people may say that $300 is a lot.
But you got to keep in mind, some of these people are recording. That's just for a day's work with some of the contracts they have put out there. Kyle was talking about, they revealed to Kotaku, and he had an interview today with comicbook.com talking about this too. So,
from a fan perspective, how does this affect you knowing, one, a main character, the main character of a show, is being taken off?
It's going to break the immersion when it's already got 24 episodes in with the character.
And then how does it make you feel about the anime studio?
I'm getting frustrated with Crunchyroll ever since Sony has fully outright bought them and Funimation anymore. They're very anti-union, and actually, from just corresponding with some actors that work in LA, and I've corresponded, I'm not going to name names.
Yes, please never name names.
But they've talked about how, since the unions come about, that they now have, in their guidelines on their contract, if they're doing any heavy vocal work that's going to be stressing out their vocals any kind of screaming they're going to be done, they're just limited to 2 hours of work for that day, and they get paid the full rate of whatever's negotiated with their union contract.
So, looking at it from a human resources perspective, I will say, as an employer, unions drive you nuts. Because based on the union contracts, you have to follow them to a T. And union contracts, admittedly, have more protections than the average employment law. And that's a really good thing for most people, because if you think about like the grocery store workers, think about that during the pandemic. I know you can speak to that directly, but from being on the human resources side for it, it's hard because you have to pay certain rates. You have to do many things. Like, you can't terminate somebody for bad performance without cause. You can't say they're just a crappy worker and get rid of them like you can in regular day-to-day life. Like Target versus King Soopers or Kroger's, depending on where you are in the country. Using them as an example, Target doesn't have unions, so people can just leave or be terminated. They'll be there one day, gone the next. With unions, they have to make a due effort to terminate. And the reason I use that as a focal point is because that demonstrates protections versus at will and just cause. So just cause employment, basically as it sounds, is you have to have a reason to terminate. But just cause can be very flimsy. It just has to follow the law, but it still can be as flimsy as possible. Whereas at will, you have no reason, you don't have to give a reason to terminate somebody. Yes, you want to have a reason just in case something ever comes of it, but technically, no. Technically, you can just get rid of somebody if they're not doing what they're supposed to.
That's why there's probation periods when you deal with a union.
But the benefit of a union, admittedly for the employee aspect, is you do have those protections when it comes to pay. That you are not used and abused. Such as, for example, my union employees versus what I do. So I'm what's considered a salaried employee. I can work 40 hours a week. That's okay because that's the expectation. But technically, my expectation is to work, for what I do on my team, is to work 45 hours in a week. Do I get paid overtime for anything that I work over 40? No. I could technically work up to 60 hours in a week, and I do have some peers that work up to 50, and I get no added benefit for it. Nobody's going to give me a reward at the end of the day. Nobody is going to give me extra bonus pay for doing that extra work. And nobody is going to do anything. I just basically take a cut on what my hourly rate would be. And essentially, there are some people who work in salaried positions. And salary doesn't have to be high-paying positions. It can be relatively low-paying as well.
I've seen some salaries at $38K a year.
And basically, by the time you flush out how many hours you work a week, you're working minimum wage or even below minimum wage. And there are no laws protecting that. With unions, you typically don't have salaried people in unions. You can. And for those salaried people, you will have protections that say you can only work a maximum number of hours a week. But for unions, you're working what's called an hourly schedule.
Or in the case of the acting community and the sports community,
you have a base rate.
Yep. And however much you get paid for that is based on performances and whatever's written into your contract.
And so that's the one benefit of being part of a union, is you do have that contractual backup that if somebody doesn't pay you what it says in the contract, they're the ones who get in trouble, not you. And if they say, well, you're just not working out, you get to ask why. Now, one of the things I have to say, pop culture wise that is really becoming really interesting, and sorry people, I apparently been having hiccups, is that the younger generation, the Gen Zers, which many of you might be watching this video, many of your peers are wanting unions for this exact reason that Crunchyroll is doing. Because Crunchyroll is going to prevent having a lot of talent come, because that talent is going to end up saying, you know what, if you're only going to pay me this amount, like for Jujutsu Kaisen, 150 to 300 bucks a pop, but your movie in the US makes 30 million.
And that's not even talking about what some of their translators have been coming out and how bad they get paid to translate an episode. They may only get paid $100 per episode.
And so you can understand in a way why these people would rather go where the money is. Now, obviously, anime fans who become voice actors, they do it because, oh my god, our voice actors are so cool. We want to be like them. The voice actors, they may look like they have money.
A lot of the money they're making off this is why you're seeing a lot of them now at conventions charging for their autographs. It's their revenue stream.
Everywhere. That's why you'll see some voice actors at almost like every single convention you go to. You're like, oh my god, they're here again. Because that's where they make the money. If not for the conventions paying them and then making additional money by selling additional autographs or prints or any of that, they're not going to make money otherwise.
Not all of them are Johnny Youngbosch who's having a resurgence in his movie career.
Well, I would say Johnny Young Bosch, Chris Patton has an excellent revenue stream through doing audiobooks, which some of his audiobooks are so weird. And then you have other teachers like Wendy Powell who teaches. And
now has her own studio and talent agency coming together as well.
Because seeing these challenge, and the talent agency really isn't for the voice acting work. It's to help get them into the anime conventions. Because the other challenge that we're seeing, and I think this is what Crunchyroll is playing on, is they only want to hire really popular voice actors.
Or because they don't want to pay the rates. Look at the Chainsaw Man dub. Outside of Susie Yang, the whole rest of the cast they've named are kind of actors there that haven't been in there around very long, or pretty much ones that have never had any leading roles before.
Because they are, for lack of a better way of putting it, desperate for the recognition and desperate for the money. Because it's back in the day, I would say probably about 10 years ago, voice acting was much more glamorous because it was still niche.
Yeah, it very much was. And then you're looking at the announcement with the Bleach coming back in its dub. It's a 100% union dub, and the director, she's advertising that.
And I think it's important. The value of dubs for the acting community. And I'm not saying the like A-lister actors out there, like Angelina Jolie or Chris Evans or anything like that. They are part of the union, but they don't need the same protections.
That's why there's Coda now, just for the dubbing industry actors.
It's really for those actors that are trying to get their foot in the door, or doing dubbing or voice acting of any sort, for American, for Japanese, for any animated property. They're the ones that need the protections, because you don't have as many studios as you did before. So there is an element where these voice actors have to go where they can. And if you have a company like Crunchyroll, who, let's just call a spade, is taking advantage of people, then what's in it for anyone to enjoy anime? This is where we're going to get back to the argument that we've had in the past podcast of the sub versus dub language track. This is where many fans are going to say, I prefer the Japanese language track instead of the English language track because of all the controversy.
Which we've had this controversy going on since 2019 with a certain unnamed actor we don't want to talk about in this podcast anymore.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about Anime Matsuri making their own voice acting studio.
Just to appease one particular person.
But nevertheless, if you see the list of all the people that are going to be in their stuff, you see a very dividing line of who listens to what.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, Crunchyroll, I can't say I'm surprised, but I'm incredibly disappointed.
Oh, well, we knew with the way Sony's been running its gaming division, even though we primarily use the PlayStation.
Yes, but all of those have to be union.
Yep. But we did see this come with the way they decided to run Crunchyroll.
Why I'm disappointed with Crunchyroll is, while I can blame Sony to a degree, they had enough voicing rights of what they could do. Crunchyroll...
Part of me wonders how much of this is the influence Aniplex has had.
Oh, 100%. But for anyone who is not familiar with the history of Crunchyroll, they were, once upon a time,
the go-to piracy site.
The go-to piracy site like Kiss Anime. Everybody talks about Kiss Anime being the best out there because you can get everything you want.
Until the Japanese shut them down.
But that's what Crunchyroll was. And then Crunchyroll went legit. And they went legit in a creative way.
Yeah, they did.
They went legit by working with all these companies.
They opened an office in Japan when they went legit. And then when they were having some financial trouble, Warner Brothers bought them. And then AT&T, when they bought Warner Brothers as part of their great sell-off, sold them off to Sony.
And while Sony frustrates me, Sony as an organization is actually an incredibly well-run machine that doesn't take advantage of people. The challenge is they have different parts. Like their gaming division, it's a very mixed bag. You can't say that Sony gaming is really bad because of the fact that they actually do a lot of good.
And they know how to market.
They know how to market. They know how to get indie developers. They know how to work with the various gaming companies out there. The challenge when it comes to the anime industry is it's incredibly lucrative, and you really only have two big players. You used to have three, but now you're really down to two, which is Viz.
And Viz is now partnering with Hulu. It makes me wonder, because...
Makes me wonder when Disney's going to buy them.
Yeah, it does make you wonder, because Warner Brothers does have Viz and DC Comics both up for sale right now.
And so you have Viz, and then you have Crunchyroll. And pre-Crunchyroll, it was, or pre the merger, it was Funimation, Crunchyroll, and Viz. Now, you do have the little guys, and I call Sentai Filmworks a little guy because while they're growing,
and to think, back 15 years ago, they were the big boys on the block.
With ADV, yes. So...
But they're now owned by AMC, so you're going to probably see them have that money backing now.
But at the end of it all, this is going to be a good learning of how the anime industry is going to handle voice actors, because
and Netflix, considering they're all three of their dubbing studios are 100% union.
Well, and that's where it's really going to see how it changes the face of animation, like anime in America, because you have Sentai Filmworks, which pretty much does selective. You have Netflix that dubs all of their stuff, and they're getting some hot properties. And now you have Crunchyroll,
who's using the fact that Sony owns 1/3 of the anime industry in Japan itself.
as a way of saying we do not have to work with unions. And I think this is where the point where voice actors are going to really have to take a stand and say, we're not going to be taken advantage of because you refuse to work with people outside of union contracts. So I think that's really all we can talk about with the controversy at this time. And this is an ongoing story, so there may be a chance that we'll do another podcast down the road to see what kind of changes come up with it, because it is going to be important to see how it's going to affect the anime industry in America, because one of the things that we do have to be aware of that these companies will do is they will pass down, if they have to go with unions, they will pass down the cost of having to pay extra money for voice actors to the consumer.
And it'll go straight onto the streaming services, or they'll just stop with the physical media is what you're probably going to start seeing.
So be conscientious that there are consequences to all of this. But at the same time,
once you get SAG breathing down your neck in the acting community, it's not going to go away. And Crunchyroll has a can of worms that they can't close.
And they need to consider how they're going to give their voice actors help making a living wage.
And also on the flip side of this too, Crunchyroll is now demanding that all the actors fly out to Dallas to record, even if they live in LA or New York.
That's foolish. But with that said, we will catch you on the flip side. We're going to have some Halloween-related podcasts to really help you enjoy the time of year.
Yes, because this is our time of the year, not 2 months later. This is our month.
I know. This is us. Even though it's a really weird show. But bye, everyone.
Bye.